Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I am Sam.
And I am Taylor.
So, imagine you are trekking through the deep Himalayas.
Oh man, just picturing the cold already.
Right. Your lungs are absolutely burning with every single step you take.
Yeah.
The wind is just howling past your ears at like 80 kilometers an hour.
It's brutal.
It really is. And in every direction, you are just surrounded by these massive towering peaks of jagged stone and glacial ice.
Yeah, totally isolated.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
finally crest a high ridge, right? You are desperate for just a moment of peace, and you look down into this shallow, bowl-shaped valley.
Expecting like a beautiful, pristine lake.
Exactly, that pristine mountain beauty. But instead of that, as the summer ice melts away, you see hundreds of human skulls just staring back at you through the crystal clear water.
Ugh, that is a genuinely terrifying image to stumble into. And it's not a hypothetical scenario at all.
No, it is very, very real. So today's deep dive is taking us straight into one of archaeology's most chilling and enduring mysteries, which is the skeleton lake of Roopkund.
Such a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are using this amazing stack of research and materials curated by 5 Senses Tours to investigate this bizarre, high-altitude glacial lake. I mean, it literally spits out human remains every single summer.
Yeah, it's wild.
So our mission today is to figure out who these people were, what they were doing in such a remote, hostile environment, and most importantly, what on earth killed them.
Well, before we can even, begin to piece together the forensic puzzle of what happened, we really need to understand the physical reality of the crime scene itself.
Right, because the location is basically half the mystery here.
Exactly. So Roopkund Lake is located deep within the Chamoli district of Uttarakhand in India, nestled way up in the Trishul Massif.
And we're talking about serious elevation here, right?
Oh, absolutely. We are talking about an elevation of 5,029 meters. Yeah, to put that into perspective, that is roughly 16,500 feet above sea level. You are crossing over into what mountaineers casually refer to as the death zone.
Jeez. I mean, the physiological toll of just existing up there is massive. The oxygen levels drop to about half of what you and I are breathing right now.
Yeah, your heart is just racing constantly to keep your blood oxygenated.
Right. And every movement feels like you are wading through molasses.
Yeah.
It is explicitly not a place where humans are meant to hang out.
Definitely not.
And for the longest time, the outside world didn't even know this little lake existed. That all changed in 1942.
Ah, right in the middle of World War II.
Exactly. Tensions are globally sky high, and this British forest ranger named H.K. Powell is out on a grueling routine patrol in this incredibly remote terrain.
He's just, doing his job, likely dealing with absolutely brutal weather, and he crests a ridge and stumbles across this natural basin.
And the ice had melted just enough.
Yeah, the seasonal ice had melted just enough that summer to expose the shallow lake bed. And it's surprisingly small, actually, only about 3 meters deep.
Okay.
But scattered all across the sharp rocks, lining the banks, and submerged in the freezing water are these really fresh-looking human skeletons.
Just everywhere.
Everywhere. We are talking skulls, femurs, rib cages, all just tangled together everywhere he looks.
Man, given the context of 1942, his immediate reaction probably wasn't archaeological curiosity. It was probably sheer panic.
Oh, 100%.
Because India was still under British rule,
Yeah.
and the war in the Pacific was raging. So Powell's immediate assumption was that he had just uncovered the casualties of a secret Japanese invasion force.
Right. He thought the enemy was trying to sneak through the treacherous mountain passes to flank the British, and they had somehow, perished in the snow.
So he sounds the alarm, the British authorities absolutely freak out, and they launch this urgent high-stakes investigation.
But when the investigators finally managed to reach the site, that whole military espionage theory just falls apart almost instantly.
Because there's no gear, right?
Exactly. They comb the area and realize there is a complete absence of military equipment. No weapons, no modern uniforms, no canteens, no radios.
Wow.
Yeah, they quickly figure out these bones aren't from a recent battle. They are incredibly old.
But the visual evidence completely contradicted that. Like you said, the bones looked fresh. I read some even still had flesh and hair attached.
Yeah, which is horrifying but true.
That bizarre visual contradiction brings us to the preservation magic of Roopkund. The environment up there acts like a state-of-the-art natural cryogenic chamber.
It really does. I mean, for 6 to 8 months of the year, the lake is locked in a deep winter freeze.
Right. And then you have the drastically low oxygen levels, which severely slows down the biological decomposition process.
Yeah, the environmental chemistry up there is essentially perfect for stopping decay in its tracks. And what's particularly fascinating is the role of the sun.
Oh, because of the altitude.
Exactly. At 16,500 feet, the atmosphere is incredibly thin. That means the ultraviolet radiation from the sun is intense.
So it acts like a sterilizer.
Literally like a massive surface sterilizer. It aggressively kills off the bacteria and microorganisms that would normally, thrive and break down organic matter.
That is wild.
Combine that sterilizing effect with the cold, dry air acting as a natural desiccant, pulling all the moisture out of the tissues, and the alkaline nature of the rocky soil, you basically get natural mummification.
It's like nature's own macabre museum, just opening its doors for a few weeks every summer before the ice swallows it up again.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
But I imagine that pristine preservation is exactly what threw off the early investigators, right?
Yeah.
Because if a body from 500 years ago looks identical to a body from 50 years ago, the visual timeline is just completely useless.
Precisely. Because the bones were in such a uniform state of arrested decay for decades, researchers and historians operated under a single massive assumption.
Which is that this was one big group.
Right. They assumed this was one group of travelers who all died in a singular catastrophic event. I mean, without advanced dating technology, if you find hundreds of bodies in the exact same state of preservation in a 3-meter radius, the logical conclusion is they died on the same day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that assumption held up for, what, over half a century?
Yeah, a long time.
But then modern science eventually catches up to the mystery, and it completely shatters that single event theory. When researchers finally got their hands on these bones to do proper radiocarbon dating on the bone collagen, the results were just an absolute bombshell.
Oh, the methodology here is what makes the twist so undeniable. So radiocarbon dating works by measuring the decay of carbon-14, right?
Which is an isotope we all absorb.
Exactly. A radioactive isotope absorbed by all living things. When you die, you stop absorbing it, and the carbon-14 slowly decays at a very specific known rate.
Okay, got it.
So by extracting collagen from the bones and measuring that decay, scientists can pinpoint a remarkably accurate time of death. And when they calibrated the results for the Roopkund skeletons.
They didn't die at the same time.
Nope. They realized the victims did not die at the same time. The deaths were separated by centuries.
That is just staggering. I mean, the oldest group of skeletons dates all the way back to between 800 and 1,000 years ago.
Right.
But then, intermingled right alongside them is a second group of remains that are surprisingly recent, like only 100 to 200 years old.
Yeah. Roopkund isn't the site of a single freak accident. It is a recurring site of tragedy. People just keep dying in this exact same spot.
Which is so creepy. And the scientific revelations didn't stop at the timeline, did they?
No, they took it a step further and conducted advanced genetic sequencing on the ancient DNA. Remember those cold temperatures and low oxygen levels we talked about?
The natural deep freeze.
Right. They didn't just preserve the bones, they perfectly preserved the genetic material locked inside them. And the DNA analysis revealed at least 3 entirely distinct population groups among the dead.
Okay, the demographic breakdown is where this goes from a regional mystery to a full-blown global one. So group 1 was South Asians, right?
Yes. These individuals had genetic markers linking them to local Himalayan inhabitants, which, makes total geographical sense.
Sure. Group 2 was an East Asian group, a bit further afield, but still entirely plausible given the ancient trade routes that snaked through the mountains.
Right, exactly.
But then Group 3, a Mediterranean group.
Yeah. The genetic markers for this third distinct group point to people of Mediterranean descent. We are talking about individuals whose ancestry traces back to places as far away as Crete or mainland Greece.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just not buying that.
I know it sounds crazy.
Greece is nearly 4,000 miles away from the Himalayas.
In the Middle Ages. How could scientists possibly be sure of a geographical match like that? That feels like a massive leap to make just based on some degraded DNA fragments.
It really does sound like an archaeological impossibility.
I mean, are we really supposed to believe this frozen puddle is some sort of medieval international airport terminal where totally unrelated people ended up stranded centuries apart?
I get the skepticism, but the supporting science is ironclad. To verify those shocking DNA findings, researchers turned to something called strontium and oxygen isotope analysis.
Okay, what is that?
Well, they performed this on the skeleton's tooth enamel.
Wait, so tooth enamel doesn't regenerate and turn over like human bone does. It just locks in whatever you consumed as a kid.
That is the exact mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, tooth enamel forms during your early childhood, and once it crystallizes, it is biologically inert. It never changes.
Oh, wow.
It acts as a geological time capsule. So strontium is an element found in bedrock that leaches into the local groundwater and soil, which then gets absorbed by the plants and animals you eat.
Exactly. Because different geological regions have distinct ratios of strontium isotopes, your teeth permanently record the specific isotopic signature of the region where you grew up.
That is incredible.
And oxygen isotopes do the same thing, varying based on local altitude and proximity to the ocean.
So it's literally a chemical geographic fingerprint
Yeah.
locked inside your jaw.
Precisely. And the analysis was definitive. The South Asian individuals had isotope signatures that perfectly matched the inland, high-altitude Himalayan valleys.
But what about that Mediterranean group?
Their tooth enamel isotopes matched low-altitude coastal areas thousands of miles away. It definitively proved they were foreigners who had traveled immense distances before dying at Roopkund.
Okay, well, mind blown. So if we have multiple totally unrelated demographic groups, locals, international travelers, men, women, and children, all dying in the exact same obscure spot hundreds of years apart, then the killer can't be an invading army or a band of robbers. It has to be something environmental. Like, what is happening in this specific mountain basin to cause this?
That leads us to the foremost theories. The foundational theory that explains the presence of these diverse groups is the doomed pilgrimage.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
The region is actually home to a massive, grueling religious festival called the Nanda Devi Rajjat, right?
Yes. And it takes place every 12 years. Thousands of pilgrims embark on a treacherous trek through these exact mountain paths to honor the mountain goddess Nanda Devi.
And the archaeological evidence found scattered among the bodies heavily supports this. They didn't find weapons of war. They found glass bangles, wooden spears used in religious processions, parasols, and basic leather shoes.
Exactly. The pilgrimage theory elegantly solves the demographic puzzle. I mean, a military force would be almost entirely young men. But here, you have a diverse mix of men, women, and children of varying ages.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, ancient trade routes frequently overlapped with these massive religious gatherings. It perfectly explains how international travelers, like our Mediterranean group, might have gotten swept up in the journey.
Oh, I see. They could have been traders tagging along for safety, paid guides, or even just spiritual seekers drawn to this massive cultural event.
Exactly.
But, a pilgrimage only explains why they were standing in that valley. It
Yeah.
doesn't explain the mechanism of how they all died simultaneously.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the actual cause of death and the leading consensus among scientists right now.
The sudden hailstorm.
Yes.
The forensic pathology here is incredibly compelling. When researchers closely examined the skulls and the clavicles, the shoulder bones, they found highly distinct fracture patterns.
What kind of patterns?
We are talking about blunt force trauma, but with a very specific signature. These were depressed fractures representing single, fatal blows striking directly from above.
What?
Yeah, the injuries didn't show the slicing marks of swords or the defensive wounds you would expect on the forearms people were trying to block attacks in a battle. They look like strikes from heavy, dense, round objects falling directly from the sky.
Hailstones.
Hailstones.
And we are not talking about the little pebbles that dent your car. We are talking about massive, lethal chunks of ice. And what is eerie is how perfectly this scientific conclusion mirrors the local folklore.
Right, the song's about the goddess.
Exactly. For centuries, traditional Himalayan songs and legends have said that the goddess Nanda Devi became enraged by travelers disrespecting her sacred mountain sanctuary. In her fury, she punished them by raining down hailstones as hard as iron.
It is a remarkable instance of ancient myth preserving a meteorological reality. The Himalayan region is notorious for its aggressive, sudden, and severe weather shifts.
And the bodies were all huddled together.
Yes, the forensics show the bodies were found clustered tightly together. This paints a grim picture. A sudden, violently severe hailstorm catches them entirely exposed in a barren, rocky landscape that offers absolutely no shelter, and they just huddle together as they are battered to death from above.
Ugh, what a way to go. But wait, whenever you have a dense cluster of bodies, especially in an era before modern medicine, you have to wonder about disease.
Oh, definitely.
If you have hundreds of pilgrims from all different regions packed together in freezing, unsanitary high-altitude camps, that sounds like an absolute powder keg for an epidemic. Could an outbreak of cholera or something similar have wiped them out?
Well, the epidemic theory was actually one of the earliest hypotheses for that exact reason. High altitudes put immense stress on the human immune system, and mixing isolated populations always introduces new pathogens.
Right.
However, the comprehensive bone analysis completely dismantled the epidemic theory. First, while DNA preserves well there, the specific bacterial and viral pathogens responsible for rapid epidemics generally do not survive long enough to show up in these tests. Ah.
More importantly, epidemics have a distinct demographic footprint. They almost always disproportionately wipe out the most vulnerable members of a population first, so the very young and the elderly.
But the skeletons at Roopkund don't show that.
No, they show a completely even age distribution.
I see. If it were a plague, you'd find a disproportionate number of child and elderly skeletons. And the source materials note there were zero markers of chronic illness, malnutrition, or long-term wasting diseases etched into the bones.
Right.
These were robust, healthy individuals whose lives were cut instantly short.
Exactly. There's also the broader climate disaster angle we have to factor in. The older grouping of bones dates to a turbulent climatic era encompassing the medieval warm period and the onset of the Little Ice Age.
Oh, so the weather was just chaotic in general.
Yes, those centuries experienced massive, unpredictable weather shifts. In addition to lethal hail, you could have had avalanches sweeping people into the basin, or glacial lake outburst floods, where a massive ice dam suddenly ruptures and a wall of freezing water sweeps an entire camp away in seconds. So we have an environment capable of unleashing freak hailstorms, flash floods, and avalanches. But, this raises a glaring psychological question for me.
What's that?
If this specific valley or weather anomaly was so incredibly deadly and it annihilated entire groups of people hundreds of years apart, why didn't people learn to just avoid this route? Why did generations of humans keep walking directly into the trap?
Well, that touches on a fundamental, almost stubborn aspect of human nature. Whether the motivation is deep religious devotion, the economic necessity of trade, or sheer exploratory curiosity, humans possess a remarkable tendency to push into dangerous frontiers despite being fully aware of the lethal risks.
That is so true.
The profound cultural drive to complete a sacred 12-year pilgrimage, or the financial incentive to traverse a lucrative mountain pass, almost always overrides the fear of a storm that might happen.
And honestly, you don't even have to look to the Middle Ages to see that psychology in action, because people are still taking this exact same dangerous route today.
They really are.
If you, listening to this deep dive right now, decided you wanted to see Skeleton Lake for yourself, you would be subjecting yourself to an absolute crucible of a physical test.
Oh, the modern trekking experience to Roopkund is punishing. You are committing to an 8 to 10-day journey covering 53 grueling kilometers.
And it starts off deceptively nice, right?
Yeah, you start down in Lohaj village, hiking your way up through these incredibly dense, humid oak and rhododendron forests. As you climb, you push up into the Bugil alpine meadows, these massive, sweeping green grasslands.
But then it changes.
Drastically, as you push higher toward the lake, all of that beautiful greenery just vanishes.
It gets completely replaced by treacherous, ankle-breaking rocky moraines and unstable glacial debris. And the environmental risks are just off the charts.
Oh yeah, the temperature routinely plummets to minus 15 degrees Celsius.
Wait, minus 15? That is insane.
Yeah. And you are dealing with those 80-kilometer-per-hour winds we mentioned earlier, plus the ever-present threat of sudden whiteout snowstorms. But honestly, the silent biggest killer on the mountain isn't the cold, it's acute mountain sickness.
Right. Because you are gaining altitude so rapidly, your body is just starving for oxygen. To even have a chance of surviving the final ascent, modern trekkers are forced to stop and acclimatize at high-altitude camps like Bagwabasa, which sits at roughly 4,300 meters.
You literally have to sit there and wait for your body to frantically produce more red blood cells just to manage the plummeting oxygen levels.
Yeah, attempting to push through the lake without that proper acclimatization is basically like trying to run a marathon while breathing through a tiny plastic straw while locked inside a walk-in freezer.
That is a terrifying analogy, but completely accurate. Your bodily systems just rapidly shut down. Fluid builds up in your lungs and your brain.
Which perfectly explains why the gear requirements today are so intensely specialized. Like, you can't just hike up to Roopkund in a heavy jacket and jeans.
No, absolutely not. Survival requires a 4-season mountaineering tent, specifically rated to withstand extreme wind shear. You need base layers made of merino wool that continue to insulate your body heat even when completely soaked with sweat or snow.
And the footwear.
You are required to wear rigid, high-altitude boots compatible with crampons or microspikes just to maintain a grip on the icy, treacherous inclines near the basin.
Plus, you're carrying personal pharmacies of altitude sickness medication, water purifiers because the natural sources are completely unreliable, and satellite messengers because cell service is a joke up there.
Right, when things inevitably go wrong, you are entirely on your own.
And yet, despite all the expense, the physical pain, and the genuine risk of death, thousands of modern trekkers still attempt it every single year.
It creates this fascinating bridge across centuries, doesn't it?
It really does. Whether it is a Greek traveler 200 years ago, a devoted local pilgrim 1,000 years ago, or a modern adventure seeker today, there is this unique human drive to explore the extreme edges of the world.
We are irresistibly drawn to these raw, dangerous environments, even when the bones of those who failed are literally scattered at our feet.
It highlights the sheer endurance of human curiosity. We just have an innate need to know what is over that next icy ridge. Even if what's over the ridge is a freezing lake filled with the skeletons of the people who asked the exact same question.
And as we look to the near future, that inherent curiosity is only going to be fueled further by massive environmental shifts.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating, if, slightly unsettling final thought. Because of the accelerating realities of global climate change, the melting season in the high Himalayas is extending longer every year.
Yeah, the cryosphere is changing and the ancient ice is retreating at unprecedented speeds.
So if a single tiny melting lake can spontaneously reveal 1,000 years of genetic data, international travel history, and forensic secrets, what other ancient frozen mysteries are currently locked in the ice, just waiting to emerge from the deep freeze?
It's a great question. Will we find more lakes like Roopkund in the coming decades as the glaciers peel back?
Given the vastness of the Himalayas, it's highly likely. Those mountains have been acting as a deep freeze for human history for millennia. We might just be scratching the surface of what's hidden up there in the ice.
Definitely something to think about.
If you decide to travel to India, we have a recommendation. Five Senses Tours organizes tours across India, which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact at fivesensestours.com, or WhatsApp to +919 845 677 446.